All right, there's a couple things that I like to always do before we start a scene, and I'm always going to select all my controllers with the GUI, and I'm actually going to set a key on frame 0. That way, if we ever need to export out this character for the game engine, if there's any updates, you can just go to frame 0, and he's also zeroed out. Before I do that though, I think I'm also going to want to change a few things that I know that I'm probably always going to be using. I'm going to be using spine FK. I'm also going to be using clavicle FK for both sides. And I like to work in local IK, so I will go into space switching, and I'm going to have the IK follow the body, and I'm going to switch it over to IK mode. So now what we have here essentially is an IK that's going to follow the character. I'm also going to go ahead and put this into body as well, so that basically both of those controllers will always follow my root. And I'm going to do the same thing for this as well. I'm going to go into IK mode and switch everything over to follow the body. So that way what you have here essentially is your arms and your elbows are going to follow the character for all the major movements, and then you've got the ability to adjust the shoulders at any given time. And I'm going to go ahead and key everything one more time at frame 0 with these settings, because I'm probably not going to deviate too much from that. There's not really a whole lot of contact. We may go into World IK at some point for one of these moves, but for the most part, I think we're going to be staying in this position. You can also set a key in frame 1, just because I'm going to be working in auto key. I'm working at 30 frames a second. For this, we're going to assume this is going to be like a celebration dance for a game scene. So this could be, you know, something that you're going to want to set before your project, so that you don't have to convert it from 24 to 30 later. And I also have my image plane reference already imported in here. If you're unfamiliar with the image plane and how to set up this, we do have a course that I mentioned in the intro that I would recommend you taking prior to this one. So if you know, if you haven't taken that course and you're not quite familiar with all these settings and the reasons and the methodologies behind it, you may want to dive into that course before taking this one, as this is going to be a rather complex set of moves. So what I have here is we're going to start going through this whole animation. It's fairly long. It's about 20 seconds. There's a lot of complex spins and arm movements here, and I'm going to take you through the process of each one. There's a lot of holds, so it's not quite as bad as what you might imagine it would be in terms of length. I did chop up this dance routine, so you can see here there's a pop, so we're going to have to kind of work from this transition and bring the hands back into the back as she comes up and does this move here, and we're going to kind of see how far along we go. But I'm thinking roughly, as I'm planning this out and thinking about it, there's a lot of material in here, so as we go, we may look for areas to shorten it. I'm going to aim for around this frame, that distance here. But it's possible that we might chop up some things as we go and kind of simplify some of these areas depending on time and you know, where we're at. So I have kind of a plan of where we're going to go for the most part, and for this, that's what's great about references. As you go, you can start to kind of see what poses are starting to organically flow into one another, and that kind of can set the pace and the tone for where you're going to be going with your scene. So let's just get started with the first pose. And she's kind of turned around all the way on the other side, and then she's going to flip around. Let's see, she's going to flip around to the beginning part. Around this frame here, where she's fully around And it doesn't have to be exact, but we do want to kind of keep it relatively close because we do want to kind of keep these other poses in mind as we're going along. For the most part, I'm going to be animating the feet and the root. So I'm going to grab these 3 controllers right here, and I am not going to be touching this offset animation controller. You can get some really strange things happening with feet, and I really would highly recommend you don't go for that solution to animate a move like this. So we already are starting with a rather complex rotation move to open up the scene. We can see that rotation is going to kind of happen as she's turning this direction, but she's facing the other way. So we're going to start kind of locking some of these things off as we start to time this animation out. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is start grabbing this guy's legs and twisting his knees around. The knees on this character can get a little difficult to work with sometimes because of the fact that they're on the same controller as the foot. So we will kind of work through that. When you do spin the character around, sometimes the knees can get a little difficult to work with. But I'll talk you through that as we start to see any issues that might come up. So for the most part, she's pretty much right at the origin, which is what we want to maintain. This is like a game character, so if we're going to have a scene in a game, it's nice to have the character in the center. That way, if you have a celebration that takes place in a game or in a select screen or something like that, the character can be placed very cleanly right on the origin and then placed in the game for whatever purpose it might be. I'm going to give a little bit of a bend to this. She's pretty much right in the center, but I don't want to have her completely locked out, and we do need to kind of make sure that the feet are relatively supporting the weight of this character. She's going to bend right away, but you can already kind of see there's a little bit of a bend here. Now this is a female character. We're working with a male for now, but the main principles are going to be very similar and kind of the same. Okay, so we do want to make sure that we do kind of have a nice curvature in the spine. I'm not going to really need to do a whole lot with this, and he already kind of by default has kind of a nice little bend here, but I'm going to just accentuate the curvature just a little bit more because she's kind of arching her back in that position and kind of creating like a little bit of a like a nest almost, if you want to call it that, like for her hands to be placed. And she's pretty much got a default neck right there, even though we can't see it with the hair. So I haven't touched the translation on really side to side movement much. She's basically right at the origin. There is a little bit of, I could see that there is like a little bit of a slight movement. I think the X is actually in this case, even though it were Z up, the X is where the translation takes place. But if we just want to make sure he's right there at the origin, we can get pretty exact or pretty close to it. Just to want to keep some lack of like mesh penetration in there if possible.